Welcome to Daily Dose of Aramaic Grammar Lessons. This is Lesson 6, in which we'll be introducing nouns, specifically talking about the gender and number of Biblical Aramaic nouns. And we can find more information about this topic in Biblical Aramaic for Biblical Interpreters, pages 32 to 35. Yes, Biblical Aramaic nouns have gender and number, and we're probably not surprised to find out that the gender is masculine and feminine, as we know from Hebrew. Now, it's a good time perhaps to bring up the topic of what grammatical gender means. Grammatical gender is a noun classification system that happens to cohere with natural gender in Biblical Aramaic, meaning male humans, male animals have masculine gender, and female humans and female animals tend to have feminine gender in Biblical Aramaic. But gender for nouns goes beyond natural gender, even to inanimate objects, in a somewhat arbitrary assignment system, although there are patterns. So we'll see more about that, talking about the form of these nouns in a moment. But now, just to show you on the screen, I have these signs showing a singular smiley face to designate singular number, so one of a thing, two faces to designate dual, where it's a special form of a noun to designate two of a noun. And then I have three smiley faces to designate plural. And it would be theoretically possible to have the number two before a plural form, to have another way to designate two of a thing other than dual. It just so happens, though, that in the Biblical Aramaic corpus, there are no such examples because of just the small size of it. So gender, masculine or feminine, number, singular, dual, or plural. Now, regarding gender, the basic form of nouns, and this is true of languages that have gender in general, the basic form is masculine. And so on the screen, I have three notional consonants, just whatever those root consonants happen to be. And there are no prefixes, suffixes, infixes, any sign that this has some special designation of gender. So normally such words are masculine, although it is possible that it could be feminine by nature. So we would have to just know that. Plus there's potentially some clues that could tell us. But in general, if there are no specific add-ons to a noun relating to feminine gender, normally a noun is masculine. Now, I've been talking about add-ons. There's a suffix, kametz he, which is the feminine noun suffix. The only tricky thing is not all feminine nouns have this kametz he suffix, but it's good to know about that. So to compare, melech, which is a word in common with Biblical Hebrew, means king, but malkah, another word in common with Biblical Aramaic, has mem lam and kaf, just like king, but it also has a kametz he suffix. So this is sort of the feminine version of king, and this makes good sense about what that kametz he suffix is doing. Now, it's interesting that there's an alternative form of the feminine noun suffix, which is kametz aleph, and this has to do actually with a commonly seen interchange between he and aleph in Biblical Aramaic. So there aren't many nouns. There are a few that have a kametz aleph ending, and in fact, here's an example, this word, fury, that has the form of both in different scripture passages. So the chet mem he or chet mem aleph with kametz he, kametz aleph ending. Same meaning. It's a feminine noun. Now I'm displaying on the screen here the various gender and number combinations. So on the left, masculine, on the right, feminine. First line, singular, second dual, third plural. And this is a little bit notional because it just so happens that there are no masculine dual nouns in Biblical Aramaic. If there were, they should have the ion ending just like in the feminine dual form. But as we can see in the upper left, basic form of the noun, no suffixes. And skipping down to plural for masculine, hirikyod noon is the suffix. So we might remember the im, hirikyod mem suffix from Biblical Hebrew for masculine plural. The Biblical Aramaic equivalent is hirikyod noon. Now going up to the top right, comets he as a suffix is the feminine singular suffix. And we have said ayin is the dual, and it just so happens that all the duals in Biblical Aramaic are body parts, either of people or animals, and they all have this ayin ending. And then plural nouns have the special ending comets noon to designate plural feminine nouns. Now, here are some examples of that principle sort of in action. So the word for beast has a comets he on the end, as we can see. Heva, right? Or cheva, sorry. And then beasts, the plural, is chevan, having the comets noon ending. So this is pretty much all as expected. What about this? Milah is a word like the biblical Hebrew word davar, which means word or thing or matter. So the comets he ending helps us know that this is a feminine noun. It's feminine singular. And then we look at the plural. Wait a minute. Why does it have an een ending? I thought that was the masculine plural ending. Well, it just so happens that there are some feminine nouns that unexpectedly perhaps take the masculine plural ending instead of feminine plural ending when it's time in the text to show a plural. So milah is one of these words. Milin is the irregular plural. Ayin means eye, just as it does in Hebrew. And interestingly, eyes also takes an een, looks like masculine plural ending, but this is a body part word, and most body parts, as we're probably familiar with from our Hebrew studies, are feminine in gender. And the special reason for putting this example on the screen is to show that a feminine noun that doesn't even have the special comets he feminine singular ending can also take the irregular plural, where it looks like it's a masculine plural form, even though from a grammatical gender and agreement standpoint, it is feminine plural. So that shows some of those suffixes in action and some dynamics that we see in the text. Okay, now I mentioned gender and number agreement. So let's look at Daniel 5:2 for one of the more complicated agreement situations. And we'll talk about the gender agreement between adjectives and nouns when we discuss adjectives. So this is mainly just to show the more complicated gender and number agreement situations that can spring up when you have a list of nouns. So in Daniel 5:2, these words read that the king, his lords, his wives, and his concubines might drink from them. So the first word is that verb idea. It's a third person masculine plural verb form. So it's that they might drink, okay? Well, who are the they? Well, it's all these different people, right? So the king. And so the king would be singular in number, and he would be masculine. So that's a masculine singular noun, right? Okay, next. His lords. So this is masculine plural. So far, so good, right? So we have the singular king and the plural lords, and this is just as expected to have a masculine plural verb for subject-verb agreement purposes. And now we look at this, his wives. Okay, well, obviously that's going to be feminine plural for a noun, right? And then his concubines, also feminine plural. But this list of all these people, it's not surprising that the subject-verb agreement would be third-person masculine plural, that they kind of idea, because masculine gender is sort of the neutral one, the non-special one. So when you have a mixed group of men and women, as is the case right here, the natural choice for subject-verb agreement in a they kind of sense, third-person plural sense, it's going to be masculine. So it's third-person masculine plural. So a list of a mixed group of genders that gets masculine subject-verb agreement and gets plural subject-verb agreement, just as we expect. So this is according to expectation. But look at this, Daniel 7:14 at the beginning. To him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom. So here we have the third person masculine singular verb idea. It happens to be passive voice. So to him was given. Well, was given what? Dominion. So that's the first word. It is masculine singular. Okay, no problem. to him was given. There we have the gender agreement, masculine. We have number agreement, singular. And glory. Okay, so this is masculine singular also, but wait a minute. Now we have two things. So it looks like we're breaking the number agreement if it's a third person masculine singular verb, right? And then finally, we have a feminine singular. So we have a mixed masculine and feminine group of nouns. They're not animate objects or anything, or animals or people, but it's mixed gender, and we understand if there's mixed gender, subject verb agreement normally goes with masculine, but it's definitely three things: dominion, glory, and a kingdom, but the subject verb agreement is with a singular verb. So what normally happens in this kind of case is subject verb agreement with the first item in the list. Okay, so if the first item in the list had been feminine, then usually that's the subject verb agreement that you have. Now it's interesting, one way to take this is that kingdom is sort of the main idea, where the nouns before it are sort of modifying it in a hendiadys kind of way. So a ruled, glorious kingdom, that sort of idea, where if that were the case, then we would definitely have a gender mismatch, right? Because the only subject in that case would be the final noun, which would be feminine singular. So it's kind of questionable, the feminine and then feminine noun and masculine verb agreement. That having been said, that's a dynamic that we see take place sometimes in Hebrew, and indeed in Ezra 6:2 there's a feminine subject noun with a masculine verb. So that kind of gender mismatch is possible. So just a summary statement we can make is we can tell from context normally what the subject of a verb is. And absent object markers or something like that, still we normally have context to know which nouns are functioning as subjects. It's good, though, to be able to take note of gender and number agreement with the verb to try to use the grammar that's presented in front of us to figure these things out. So final thing to say is, just like in Hebrew, we shouldn't be too mechanical with our looking just at the suffixes of words to assign gender, because the dominion word shaltan, well, that word has the comets noon ending, but it's masculine singular. Okay, so that just happens to be the spelling of the word. Well, that brings us to the end of this part of Lesson 6. I look forward to seeing you in Part 2.